They didn't want him to succeed. Anthony Quinn didn't look like a leading man. He didn't sound like one, and he definitely didn't act like one, at least not by Hollywood standards. He was too passionate, too proud, too ethnic. He didn't blend in, he broke through. And in an industry obsessed with perfect smiles and polished accents, Quinn's presence was a disruption, a necessary one. While most actors climbed the ladder by obeying the rules, Quinn lit the ladder on fire. His performances were primal, intense, unapologetically raw, and that terrified people. Because for all its glitz, Hollywood wasn't built to handle someone like Anthony Quinn, not at first. But over the decades, he became something far more dangerous than a star. He became a symbol of resistance, of reinvention, of rage and beauty coexisting on screen. And the story of how he got there is more unbelievable than any role he ever played. Anthony Quinn was born in 1915 in Chihuahua, Mexico, but his origin story wasn't wrapped in glamour. It was soaked in struggle. His father, a half-Irish, half-Mexican revolutionary, had ridden with Pancho Villa, a real-life outlaw hero. But when Quinn was just 4 years old, his father was killed, an early loss that left a permanent scar on the boy's psyche. His mother, Irish-Mexican and fiercely independent, moved the family to East Los Angeles, hoping for a better life. What they found was prejudice, poverty, and a city that didn't welcome outsiders. Quinn grew up in the margins, fighting, hustling, surviving. He wore secondhand clothes. He boxed in underground gyms. He picked up jobs just to put food on the table. At school, he was mocked for his name, his accent, his skin. So he fought back, not just with fists, but with words. He studied art. He listened to music. He explored religion, philosophy, sculpture. All of it shaped him into something most people didn't see coming, a fierce intellectual hiding in a laborer's body. Before acting ever came into play, Quinn worked as a preacher's translator, a prize fighter, and even as a speech coach for Orson Welles, before anyone gave him a role on screen. Think about that, teaching the greats how to speak while waiting tables and laying bricks just to survive. The system didn't make room for him, so he started kicking down doors. When he finally cracked into Hollywood, the roles were insulting: savage, thug, slave, Indian, bandit. Every casting call had the same message. You're not one of us, but you can play a version of what we fear. He was never the hero, always the villain, always the other, and it burned him. But instead of rejecting those roles, Quinn did something radical. He made them real. He gave his so-called villains humanity, intelligence, soul. His characters weren't cartoons. They were dangerous because they had depth. Hollywood noticed, but they didn't quite know what to do with him. Studios loved his intensity, but they didn't trust it. Casting directors admired his power, but labeled him too ethnic to carry a picture. Still, he broke through. His performance in Viva Zapata in 1952 changed everything. As Eufemio Zapata, the hot-headed brother of Marlon Brando's character, Quinn stole every scene. And when he won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, it was history. The first Mexican-American actor to win the Academy's top prize. But success didn't come without resistance. Some critics said he was too big on screen. Others couldn't pronounce his name. A studio exec once warned him to change it altogether, something more palatable. Quinn refused. He had the award. But he wasn't done fighting for respect. In an industry where everyone clawed for fame, Quinn did the unthinkable. He walked away. Despite his rising success, he grew tired of the limits Hollywood put on him. The recycled roles, the backhanded compliments, the closed doors. So in the 1950s, at the height of his career, Quinn packed his bags and moved to Europe, a move that shocked his peers. But in Europe, he wasn't typecast. He was celebrated. Directors like Federico Fellini didn't see a brown-skinned outsider. They saw a force of nature, and in La Strada, 1954, Quinn played Zampano, a brutish street performer who abuses the woman who loves him. The role was heartbreaking, brutal, and layered in a way American scripts never allowed him to explore. It won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film and made Quinn a global figure. He followed that with a string of powerful performances. He played emperors, poets, soldiers, no typecasting, no begging for parts. Then came Lust for Life, where he portrayed Paul Gauguin, the arrogant, sensual painter who clashes with Vincent van Gogh. He was only on screen for 8 minutes, and he won his second Oscar. In Europe, he found something far more valuable than fame. He found creative freedom, and when he returned to Hollywood, he wasn't the same actor. He was a storm waiting to hit. The 1960s belonged to Anthony Quinn. This was the decade where he wasn't just respected, he was feared, adored, and immortalized. In The Guns of Navarone, he played a Greek colonel, layered in honor and rage. In Lawrence of Arabia, he was a tribal leader whose power rivaled T.E. Lawrence himself. He didn't just appear in these films, he loomed. His voice was thunder, his eyes were defiance, and no one could match his intensity. But then came Zorba the Greek, a role that fused everything he had ever been. Zorba was joy, Zorba was madness, Zorba was grief and lust and wisdom all rolled into one wild soul. And Quinn didn't just act the part, he was Zorba. The movie exploded in popularity. Audiences across the world danced the Sirtaki in his honor. Quinn didn't win the Oscar this time, but he didn't need it. He had become a myth, a symbol of passionate living, and a cultural icon. And yet, as his on-screen legend grew, his personal life was spiraling into chaos. Anthony Quinn lived as fiercely off-screen as he did on it, and that came with a price. He married his first wife, Catherine DeMille, daughter of the legendary director Cecil B. DeMille, and together they had 5 children. But their marriage was volatile, torn apart by Quinn's constant infidelity. Affairs weren't occasional, they were constant, public, brazen. He fathered children with multiple women outside his marriage, including his secretary and even the daughter of a longtime mistress. The press caught wind of it more than once, and some of the paternity lawsuits dragged through the courts for years. In total, Quinn had at least 12 children, but some biographers suspect the real number might be higher. He was a man who loved deeply, but not faithfully. His charisma was intoxicating, even as it destroyed the relationships closest to him. In interviews, he rarely expressed regret. "I live by my passion," he said once. "I never claimed to be a saint." That passion, that unpredictability, it made him magnetic, but it also left scars that his children would carry long after he was gone. For all the power Anthony Quinn carried on screen, there was one wound that never fully healed: his relationship with Mexico, the country of his birth. Quinn was proud of his roots. He spoke about them often. He fought for Latino representation in Hollywood and never shied away from his heritage. But when it came to recognition from his homeland, the response was cold, distant, at times even hostile. When he returned to Mexico in the 1980s, hoping to reconnect with his past and even film a few projects there, he found a country that viewed him with suspicion. Many saw him as too American, as someone who had abandoned his people to make it in Hollywood. Others resented the way he represented Mexicanness through Hollywood's lens. The rejection cut deep. Quinn once admitted in an interview, "I always thought I'd be embraced. I thought I'd be one of their own, but I wasn't, not really." That sense of not belonging, not in Mexico, not in America, haunted him until the very end. He was too Mexican for the Oscars, too American for his homeland, a man without a tribe constantly forced to define his own. This complex identity would push him into one last transformation, one that had nothing to do with acting. As Quinn entered the final decades of his life, the intensity didn't fade, but the spotlight shifted. Acting had once been everything, but now art became his obsession. Long before he ever stepped onto a movie set, Quinn had been a painter and sculptor. And now, finally, he returned to that early love. And just like in film, he didn't settle for mediocrity. He created over 100 works of art, many of them bold, tortured pieces that explored identity, masculinity, and isolation. His sculptures were shown in galleries from New York to Paris. His paintings sold for thousands. Critics called him a natural primitive, a term he rejected because, as he reminded them, he was educated, trained, and deliberate. This wasn't just a vanity project, it was his soul poured onto canvas. He also became more outspoken about Hollywood, about race, about how the industry continued to marginalize actors of color, even after his so-called breakthroughs. He slammed the way Latino characters were written, he mentored young artists, and he never stopped calling out injustice, even when it cost him work. In 1990, well into his 70s, he starred in Revenge with Kevin Costner. The role was powerful, menacing, complex, and completely overshadowed by tabloid rumors about his failing health, his many children, and the chaos of his personal life. But even as the gossip swirled, Quinn refused to apologize for who he was. "I am not a good man," he said once, "but I am an honest one." On June 3, 2001, Anthony Quinn passed away from respiratory failure. He was 86 years old. At the time, many news outlets praised his achievements: 2 Oscars, 100-plus films, a career that spanned 7 decades. But what they didn't say was just as important. They didn't talk about the way he fought to exist in a system that was never built for men like him. They didn't acknowledge the years of typecasting or how often he had to leave the country just to be taken seriously. They glossed over the fact that even at his peak, he was rarely offered lead roles that didn't play into stereotypes, and they barely mentioned the cost, the broken families, the cultural rejection, the decades-long battle for identity. But those who knew him, really knew him, understood. Anthony Quinn wasn't just an actor. He was a fighter, a boundary breaker, a man who didn't wait for permission to be great. His children, though many were estranged, spoke openly at his funeral, some with love, others with hurt, but all with respect, because no one could deny the truth. Quinn lived on his own terms. In a town full of masks, he stayed unmasked. Anthony Quinn didn't fit into Hollywood. He bent it, twisted it, forced it to recognize him. He opened doors for generations of actors who looked like him, who sounded like him, who refused to play by the rules. Today, when we see Latino actors headlining major films, when we hear names like Benicio del Toro, Gael Garcia Bernal, or Diego Luna, we're seeing the ripple effect of a man who refused to fade into the background. But Quinn's legacy isn't clean. It's not polished. It's complex like the man himself. A legacy full of contradictions, pride and pain, artistry and arrogance, love and betrayal. And maybe that's the most honest version of greatness we can hope for. Not perfection, but passion. In the end, the man Hollywood tried to silence roared louder than anyone could have imagined. Anthony Quinn didn't just play legends, he became one. But the price of being unforgettable was never being understood.